welcome everybody to our latest drop-in session. So today's topic is looking at how to display stage gates within a process within Spark. Uh, what what sort of prompted this topic recently is this is something that's come up many times over the years, but was actually working with a client in construction recently. Again, it's something I've seen in that space quite a lot, but this client had a specific requirement for certain types of information that they wanted to capture against the stage gate. So it got us thinking about sort of how the different approaches that we've taken to doing this over the years. So I mean, there's lots of variations on this, but what I've pulled together today is it's pretty simple, I think, or certainly one of the examples I'll show you is very simple, and then the other one is quite advanced. So rather than sort of taking all the different approaches we've seen, I've chosen to sort of take the two kind of extreme ends of the scale, if you like, and just sort of talk you through the thinking behind some of the different approaches that you can take. So I'll start by what I mean by a stage gate. I mean, I've actually used the title. I've called it project stage gates because this is more often than not where we see them. So again, using the construction example, it's a project. This was a project that went right the way through from sourcing land, all the way through to 2 years after the property had been constructed, or 2 years after the handover and everything was sort of settled down. So they are projects, but they can often be massive. Another example of where I've seen or where we've used this is in marketing and brand building organizations. And again, some of these projects are massive, they're global, and they take months and months and months from ideation of, say, a marketing campaign all the way through to all the assets being created and then pushed out through different channels, whether it's TV advertising or newspaper, magazines, and social media. So at that scale, often what's important is really good project governance, and therefore where you're also investing a huge amount of time and money, or there's a massive amount of risk involved, then making sure you've got all the right information to make decisions or key decisions before you progress to the next stage or phase of the project. And so the stage gates we're talking about here are really those sort of no-go decision points that you have throughout the process. Now, ultimately, they are just activities that happen within the process, but it's kind of the other information that you might need to capture or understand that goes around that. So let's start with the very simple one that I've got here. So the example that I'm using here from process example I'm using here is one from a sort of change or transformation type project. So digital transformation. And so typically there'll be some sort of strategy set about, okay, what is it that we want for the organization? How do we think we want digital technology to change what we're doing? Different organizations do it for different reasons, or certainly they'll have a different primary driver or objective. Sometimes it can be about cost reduction, sometimes it's about compliance, and probably more often than not it's about customer experience and quality, that sort of thing. All of those factors will play a part in it, but there's generally tends to be one sort of overriding driver. So there's some sort of strategy gets set. Then what we need to do is go and work out what the opportunities for that transformation might be. Once we've identified what those are, we need to understand the detailed requirements. Then we can select some sort of solution that can meet those requirements. That then gets developed or configured, tested, users are trained, and then we can implement and go live. And again, so a lot of these early stages are really key getting them right. And actually, where I've worked with teams over the years that have had problems with their change and transformation project, it's often because there wasn't really enough governance early on, and people just wanted to jump in and dive into the solution stage too quickly without really understanding the problems first. So again, here we've got 6 gates in the process, and all I've done is actually the gate is something that's going to happen, or the decision is something that's going to happen in the preceding activity. Um, but what I've done is I've used an icon to highlight the output. So this is more about highlighting the decision that's been made. We've had a gate, the strategies approved in this case. We've got opportunities approved. We're going to proceed to selection or solution agreed. So in this example, all we're doing, and as I said, this is the very simple example, is just highlighting where the gates happen, or where that the output of that decision is made within the process. Now, going back to the client that I mentioned before in the construction one, this is essentially what they had done traditionally, is that they sort of had a high level process and then it just highlighted where the gates were. Just technically how I did this, it's just an output or a Y box on there, and I've used the icon feature to create that. So I'll just quickly show you how that works. I'll use this one box here that doesn't have the icon in it. So to add an icon in there, I can double click on the box. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add this at the beginning of the text. So to do an icon, you'll see at the bottom of the text box here, we've got these little shortcuts, and the second one there, which is a colon, says add icon. So if I do a colon in there, then it gives me that list of icons. And I think if I start to type, if you start to type a word, it will then filter that down to show you. So I used the flag there. So click on that, and that allows me to put the icon. Now, what you'll see I've done here is mine's quite big and it's red. And so the way I do that is, again, in almost every single place you see a text field within Spark, you'll get this little button here, which is open the full text editor. And that gives you a lot more options in terms of editing your text. So if I come up here and go to my icon, I'm going to select my icon up there. And then here I can then do things like change the color of it. So I'll make it red. I can change the size of it, or I can use headings. So I might put a heading style like that. Actually, I'm not going to make that one a heading. I'm going to change the text size. So I'll put that up to text times 5. And the other thing I want to do is center the text, although this is an output, so it'll be centered anyway, but just to show you that feature, right? If you're using text fields that aren't, I can align the text in there. And so close that, and that's how I put my icon in there. Okay. So as I said, really useful. It's probably more useful when this is where you want to highlight gates, but it's probably for smaller type projects. You just want to show sort of where the key decision points are made in the process. So as I said, this other example that I was talking about before, actually what they really needed to do, because this is what they'd done first, but what they discovered is that one of the challenges they were facing is that when they were going through the gates, not everyone was clear on what the criteria for the gate was. And so we looked at it in slightly more detail in terms of how to define those gates. So let me show you an example of how we did that. Again, I'm going to use the same process, this sort of digital transformation process that that I had before. And the main difference here is that actually the gate, so as I said before, like that decision point that the gate represents is really an activity. It's an activity where someone has to make a decision based on various inputs. So as a result, I've actually mapped out the detailed views underneath these boxes. I've only done the first 2 for this example to demonstrate it, but obviously you'd expect all of the boxes to be there. So if I click into the detailed view, again, this is an example process. It's not supposed to be super detailed or anything, but as part of our defining the strategy, we're doing some sort of research into industry trends, research into technology trends, like what are our competitors or peers doing in the industry, what technologies are available that might be able to help us. You might be looking at AI and all sorts of other things. So you get insights into that. You're then going to probably do some sort of current state assessment on the organization. So it's not going to be a detailed assessment, but a sort of high level assessment, again, competitor research, all of that sort of thing, some sort of SWOT analysis. And then you can sort of start pulling together all that input to draft a strategy. And then that strategy has to be approved. Now, so I've made this the gate one, and you'll see just on the box here in terms of the accountability for that approval step, I've put the CEO, might be chairman of the board or whatever, depending on the organization and the level of strategy that you're looking at. But the other thing you'll notice is this box is red, and I'll show you, explain why in a second. But again, it's in the same way as I used the flags on the previous example, it's to highlight this as a gate. And the other thing is I've got an attachment on here, and what I've done with this attachment, if I open this up, is I've created a form within the platform, which I've called a stage gate form. And that form has various types of information. So I've let me go and edit this so it's easier to see. So I've created at the top, so what stage are we at? And this is a little drop down, so it allows me to set the stage. Is it the strategy, opportunity, requirement, solution, build, launch stage? Now, in this case, I have actually written gate one on the box, and it says strategy on the box. So you have a good idea. But I found as I was drawing the process out, you don't always kind of write the activity in quite that way. So I thought it was valuable to have what the stage is on the attachment. I put a description field, what we need to do. I've sort of pinched some of the ideas. This isn't exactly how we did it on the customer example that I mentioned, but essentially they had a list of things that they needed to make sure were present at each of the stages, and so we used a sort of series of tick boxes. And what this allowed them to do is that when they were getting to the stage, they could go and review this. It was quite a long list in their case, but they could go and review it and say, okay, for gate 2, we need to make sure these 5 things have been done, or this documentation has been pulled together before we book the meeting in where we're going to discuss and progress this. But I just sort of added a few things here. So does this particular gate require a budget decision? Does it require a legal sign off? Is there a third party involved that might need sign off? So for example, in your gates later on, where we're actually getting into the implementation of a solution and you've got a third party involved in implementing or configuring and so on, then when you get to launch, you need that third party involved because everyone needs to be aligned and agreed that everything has been delivered and so on. So those are just simple checkbox options that are on there. And then a bit further down, I've also included decision makers. So again, as I said, on the box itself, I've put the CEO as the accountable role on the box. But when we go into the decision making for that gate, we can then capture, okay, who might the other roles be within this. So again, in my form there, I've created a role field and I've used a multi-select role field so I can add multiple roles to it. You can do the same thing with a user field. So if you wanted to be even more specific and say it's specific people that you wanted to highlight as the decision makers, in this case, you could use the user picker field. But we're always looking at the sort of long-term life of a process, and people come and go and roles change. So that's why I've used the role example. Just an interesting thing on this, when you add a role like this to an attachment, although it doesn't get displayed directly onto the box like this, you could use the form setting to display it on the box. Although I think it's quite nice if you've got a long list of roles involved, you don't necessarily want them visible on the box all the time because it makes the box very big. But I have been in some organizations where that's quite important and they do want to see who those people are. So you've got a little bit of a choice there. You could just list them all on the box if you wanted to. Again, it's up to you, or you can put them on here like I did. Again, I'm sort of trying to demonstrate the different features that we've got available, but put them on here, and then you could make that field on the form visible on the box. So you could, although you've added it into the form, you could also display it on the box at the same time. So there's two different ways of doing that. Just another little kind of note to make there, which is quite cool, is that if you've added roles through a form like I have here, they still come up in your roles report. So when you go and do business tools and roles into the role manager, where you can then see a role and see what activities they're associated with, you'll see these roles would still be associated with this activity by virtue of the fact that they're on the form that's attached to it. So that's quite useful as well. Really useful for sort of really starting to understand what those interdependencies are and so on. Here I've just added another text field, which is about the gate criteria as well. But of course, you can add any of the things that you want. As I said, I've kept this very simple. The example that I've been talking about that sort of drove us to put this session on was they had quite a lot of information in there. But again, they were big construction processes or projects and programs that spanned multiple years in some cases. And so, a lot of these gates, when they come to them, they're so important because of the risk and the costs involved with the decisions that need to be made. It was important to have all of that information. What is all the criteria that we need? Because different teams say these projects are multi-year, but you'd have multiple projects going on at any one time. So one person involved in organizing the gate approval might not do that for 18 months on a particular gate, before they do it again. So having that well clearly documented against the process was really important for them in that case. And of course, the one of the other benefits of using the form like this is the reportability on it. And so again, I can go and run business. So go to business tools, reporting, and I can go to my forms, stage gates, and then I can run a report. So in my example I've got here, I've only put the 2 stage gates on there, but I get all the description. All the fields from my form. So there's the description, there's the different check boxes I need. So does it require budget decisions, legal sign off, who are the decision makers, the gate criteria, and the gate stage as well. So again, that's quite useful, especially if you wanted to run a report to go, have we included all the gates? There's 6 gates, have we included all of them in a particular process? Okay. So the last thing I was just going to touch on is it's not really a different way of viewing it, but we see a lot of people using landing pages to make a sort of more visual way of looking at a process or providing people access to a process. Just wanted to show you. So again, same customer. This is ultimately what they ended up doing, because they always had this kind of nice sort of landing page for the project. Now I've just created something very, very simple here, which I've done in PowerPoint. I've just used the sort of the little charts that you can create in PowerPoint. But the point being here is that I've got the main sort of stages of the process. I've got the gates on here as well, but I've made these 2 separate clickable. So if I just want to look at the strategy overall process, I can open that. It will show me the process. But equally, if I wanted to really specifically highlight the gate, for example, so I want to go straight to the gate criteria, it's the same process that we just looked at, but if you'll see the difference here when I click on this one, so when I click on it, it's highlighting that gate step for me. Now, I know my gate was highlighted anyway by being red, but again, in the example that I've been talking about, there was one area of the process where they actually had 2 gates on the same page. And so again, that ability to link not just to a diagram within your process, but to a very, very specific box in it is quite useful. And again, if you're trying to guide somebody straight as quick as possible to what is the criteria for the gate, that's sort of how we did it. So I'll just quickly go back to my little landing page there, and again, just quickly how I did this. So the process in this case is an image that I created from PowerPoint and dropped onto the canvas here. Then I use little note boxes, which I've made transparent over the two parts of the image there. And then within them, I've used a link to another part of the process. So on this one, where I just wanted to open the diagram, what I linked to was the parent activity and its detail. And on this one, I linked specifically to the gate activity to take me there. And I think that's it. Just going to say, in terms of creating the form, I think we covered forms a few weeks ago, but what I am going to do after this is I'm going to provide in the Netcall community. So we've just recently opened up a Spark section within the Netcall community. We've also updated the manual that's in there as well. So what I'm going to do after this session is I'm going to post a little post just describing the things that I've been through, and then links to the manual. So things like how I create the form, for example, that I used on my gate there, will link you to the manual entry, so you'll be able to go and see how to do those sorts of things. And I'll do the same with the linking, so you can be able to look at that sort of subtle difference between how do I link to a page or a diagram versus a specific box within the process. If you haven't been to the Netcall community yet, it's community.netcall.com, but you will have to set up or register to join it. And then once you get in, you'll be able to see all the different sections within there, including Spark.